The storm began the night the magma-red moon vanished behind slate-colored clouds, smothering the ghost light that usually bled across the snows of the gift. Atop the wall, Jon Snow stood alone at the edge of the night, Lord Commander only by desperate acclamation, his black cloak snapping like a tattered banner in the frozen wind. Below him, ice groaned with a low, cavernous note as though some leviathan slumbered inside the wall's ancient heart. He pressed a gloved palm to the crenellation and felt a subtle vibration, like the thud of a distant hammer. It was wrong. The wall seldom spoke, and when it did, its voice was never so urgent. Ghost, for bristling silver pale in the dark, prowled at Jon's side. The direwolf growled at shadows that seemed too deep, too hungry. Down in the haunted forest, torches bobbed like fireflies, patrols from Eastwatch riding hard for Castle Black. Jon had sent them to confirm the rumors whispered by wildling scouts, dead villages. Empty longbarrows cracked open from within, faint blue glimmers sighted moving in columns beneath the trees. He'd hoped the tales were soldiers' fear-given shape. But he could feel, in a way he could never describe, that the dead were truly on the march. A horn blast echoed. 1. Rangers returning. Jon narrowed his eyes at the western approach. Shapes emerged, tattered, staggering, lanterns sputtering. As they drew closer, the smell reached him even from atop the wall: rot, copper, cold earth. The first men through the tunnel wore the black, but their faces were gaunt, pale, with eyes of milky blue. Jon's stomach clenched. They were rangers he had known, small Renly of Maidenpool and Rusk the Thief, but death had hollowed them. Open the gate, one of them hissed, voice cracking like ice. Their jaws did not move, the words seemed breath through cracks in brittle skin. Behind them, beyond the tower's murdered torchlight, more shapes gathered, thousands. Jon saw antlers of hoarfrost sprouting from skulls, saw armor rimed thick with snow, saw a tide of dead horses, eyes ghost bright. And at their center, seated astride a stallion black as obsidian, was a figure wreathed in a crown of icicles. The Night King raised one gloved hand. The wall answered. The groan Jon had felt swelled to a roar. A fissure ran spider-fast along the ancient ice, glowing in unholy blue. Lanterns shattered, torches died in screaming gusts of wind. Jon shouted orders archers to the battlements. Bar the tunnel? But his voice was lost beneath the thunder of cracking stone. South of him, a glittering blue rift curved from edge to edge like lightning caught in crystal. With a shudder, a segment of the wall almost a league long sheared away, tumbling through the night in glittering shards. Snow and ice rose like tidal spray. When it settled, a jagged breach cut the wall in two, wide as a river mouth. Through it spilled the dead. At Winterfell, the yard echoed with the ring crack of steel on frozen wood. Stannis Baratheon drilled his knights under iron-gray skies, harsh voice barking faults, correctives, refinements of form. His campaign in the north had slowed to a crawl, Carhold's gates lay charred, but the Karstarks yet harried his foragers, Deepwood Mott had bent the knee, but Asha Greyjoy's reavers plagued the King's Road. Supplies dwindled. Men cursed the endless cold, cursed the lord they served, cursed their own hope. Yet Stannis persisted. Each dawn, drills, each evening, councils, each night, prayer by shadowed firelight beside the Red Woman and her bowl of leached flames. This dusk, Melisandre watched from the battlements, scarlet silks rustling as she turned her face toward the distant wall. Her eyes, usually lit by secret embers, widened with childlike wonder, or was it dread? She exhaled and her breath escaped her lips in a twisting pattern as though shaping unseen words. "Lord of Light preserve us," she murmured. Below, Davos Seaworth stepped to her side. He followed her gaze but saw only snow. "My lady?" "A great shadow rises," she whispered. "Cold. Ancient. Hungrier than time." She closed her eyes. "The wall is broken." Thunder rolled across the hearthlands, yet no cloud stirred the heavens. Men in the yard paused mid-stroke, glancing skyward. Horses whickered, stamping nervously. Then came another sound, a horn blast, but deeper, resonant as a cathedral bell. It carried from the north across leagues of frozen waste. 1, 2, 3. The horn of winter, Melisandre breathed, though such a thing belonged to myth. The dead are free. Stannis pushed through the onlookers, white breath curling around his words. "Speak sense, woman. What storm approaches?" She met his gaze. "A storm of blue fire, my king. A storm born of death." At her words, the air grew colder still. Frost spidered across the leather of Stannis' gauntlets. Even the heat from the nearby forge dimmed, flames shrinking as if suffocated. A raven burst from the rookery, feathers rimed with frost, croaking wild. It spiraled downward, collided with the courtyard stones, shattered like fragile glass. Gasps rose. The queen squired Clay Serwyn crossed himself. Stannis ground his teeth. "Sound the muster," he commanded. Every man fit to ride, ready your saddles. He turned to the Red Woman. If the wall is breached, Winterfell will not stand idle. We march north at dawn. Melisandre's lips curved in a faint smile. At dawn, sire, the wall's doom will already be upon us. Dawn will bring no light if the darkness has swallowed the sky. Bran Stark dreamt of ravens again. No, he was the ravens, hundreds living in one mind, each wing beat a pulse in one shared heart. He soared across a sea of white, the wall a ruin of smoking ice behind him. Below, columns of corpses trudged south, their footprints burning blue. He felt the cold of them, a cold that numbed thought itself. Within that chill, he sensed a consciousness old as the last winter, vast as the sky above the Frostfangs. It brushed against him like a knife tip along flesh. Brandon Stark asterisk. It whispered in the tongue of dead leaves. Come to me. Terror yanked him back. He woke in the Weirwood cave, sweat freezing on his brow. Hodder slept curled beside the warmth of a dying ember. The three-eyed crow, for so Bran still thought of the ancient green seer, sat upon a root throne, eyes milky but aware. You saw it, the green seer rasped. Bran nodded, voice shaking. The wall, it's broken. The Night King, he's coming. Always was, the green seer sighed. Fate is a wheel, and the spokes lead always to the center. You must learn quicker, Brandon. The singers had ages. You have hours. Bran swallowed. He was only a boy, and yet entire kingdoms balanced on his fledgling gift. Teach me, then. The greenseer's roots tightened around the cavern floor. There is no more time for teaching, only doing. He beckoned, and Bran felt branches threading through his mind, guiding him beyond the cave, beyond the snows, to Winterfell's Godswood. He slipped into the heart tree, seeing through red leaves and white bark as though they were his own eyes. But what he saw chilled him. The weirwood's face weeping sap that froze as it flowed, its tears crusting in jagged prisms. And in the distance, faint but undeniable, blue lights flickered beneath the tree-lean of the Wolfswood. Far south in the neck, at Moat Caelin's smashed towers, Roose Bolton received the news in the form of a half-frozen rider whose horse dropped dead at the gate. The man babbled of living shadows breaching the wall, of ice dragons soaring over Last Hearth, of the Umber's hearth fires extinguished in a single breath of winter. Bolton's maester tended the man's scant minutes before his heart stopped, flesh turning chalk white. Roose dismissed the body with a glance. Send word to the Freys, he told Maester Tybalt. Tell them the wall is fallen and the dead march. Tell them the Dreadfort will not waste men defending Winterfell should Stannis choose suicide. Ramsay snorted from the window where he toyed with a dagger. Father, if the tales are true, the dead will not wait for invitations. They will come regardless. Roose's pale eyes showed no flicker. Then let them come. Winterfell is stone and old magic. The castle stood against Bael the Bard, against Red Kings and Ironborn. It may stand yet again. And if it doesn't? Ramsay spun the dagger by the hilt. We flee south like whipped dogs? A hound knows when to bare teeth and when to submit, Roose said mildly. You would do well to remember. Yet even as he spoke, distant thunder reached his ears, like icebergs calving. The wind through the shattered causeways howled with voices not its own. Roose Bolton, who prided himself on an iron pulse, felt the first tremor of unease shiver through his veins. The flight from Castle Black became a massacre before it began. Jon Snow rallied what men remained, less than 200 Black brothers, 80 loyal wildlings under Tormund Giant's bane, a score of watchful giants, and ordered a retreat along the King's Road to Mole's Town. But the Night King, astride the undead stallion, swung a spear of translucent frost. Where its tip pointed, a blizzard condensed, spiraling like a living serpent. The snowstorm swallowed the fleeing column, blinding men, chilling flesh until armor froze to skin. Then the dead struck. Colhands, mounted on an elk tall as any destrier, appeared in the chaos, eyes black, voice calm. He cut a path through whites, guiding Samwell, Tarly, and Gilly toward the tree-lean. South and keep south, he urged. The child must live. Sam, breath-wheezing, felt drag-a-glass but no courage. Yet he followed, clutching Gilly's hand, little Sam bundled against her breast. Behind them, the wall's last defenders died one by one, Bowen Marsh gutted by a white-eyed ranger, PYP and Gren fighting back-to-back until arrows of ice pinned them to the snow, Ed Tollett rallying archers only to be beheaded by a spear maiden he once loved. Jon fought on foot beside Tormund, Longclaw shining starbright, each stroke sending limbs flying. Ghost lunged at dead dire wolves, tearing icy throats. Yet numbers told. For every corpse felled, 3 more rose. Jon's shoulder numbed, frost glittered along Longclaw's Valyrian edge. He felt the sword wailing in his grip as if hating the cold that gnawed it. A horn sounded south, Lady Lyanna Mormont leading 50 bear knights in fur-rimmed plate. They charged, torches blazing, and crashed into the whites. Yet flame flickered and died under unnatural winds, leaving steel that shattered on corpses that did not bleed. Lyanna, fierce as her namesake, swung a flanged mace, knocking skulls loose. When the Night King's gaze fell upon her, frost blossomed across her armor. She raised her mace, lips parted, perhaps in a roar, perhaps a prayer, before she froze solid mid-stride, a child statue of black iron and rhyme. In the next heartbeat she shattered. Jon screamed, sound lost in the howling wind. The Night King advanced, indifferent. With a gesture, he called his lieutenants, 12 white walkers crowned in dying starlight. They formed a crescent around Jon and Tormund. Frost crept up Longclaw's hilt toward Jon's hand. Despair pressed on his heart heavier than the cold. No hope, no dawn. And then a horn answered from the south. Not Castle Black's. Brass, deep, restless. Over the rise galloped a vanguard of heavy horse bearing the fiery stag standard of House Baratheon. At their head, sword aflame with orange sorcery, rode Stannis. Behind him thundered cavalry of the Stormlands, banners whipping. Moonlight glinted on breastplates emblazoned with burning hearts. Archers loosed flaming arrows that screamed through the dark. The Night King raised a hand. Snow coalesced into a shield of whirling ice, and the arrows extinguished mid-flight. Yet their fleeting light revealed surviving black brothers, battered but standing. Jon's eyes met Stannis. So much unspoken passed between them. Accusation, gratitude, grim resolve. Davos rode beside his king, face drawn, torch in his good hand, short sword in the other. Melisandre stood upon a chariot drawn by pale Mares, hair streaming like a banner. She raised her arms. The rubies at her throat flared. Fire licked the air, fanning into a wall of blaze that stalled the whites. For a heartbeat, warmth returned to numbed flesh. Jon seized the moment, hacking through icebound armor, carving a path toward the breach. But flame alone could not halt the dead for long. The Night King pointed his spear, wind howled, extinguishing Melisandre's conjured fire. Darkness surged forward, swallowing light. Davos spurred his mount between the Red Woman and an advancing walker. The creature's frost blade slipped beneath his breastplate, and the Onion Knight toppled, eyes wide in shock, breath crystallizing midair. Jon dragged Davos onto Ghost's saddle. The direwolf bounded away, blood spraying from Davos's wound, steam rising. Castle Black is lost, Jon snarled to Stannis. Retreat to Winterfell. Stannis bared his teeth, part pain, part fury. I do not retreat. Then you will die, and your cause with you. Stannis glanced at the Night King, at the endless ranks of silent corpses. He spat. Very well. He raised his sword. A single trumpet sounded. The Baratheon host wheeled south, shielding what remained of the Night's Watch. Those unable to mount were hauled onto wagons or behind saddles. Jon led the column, Melisandre chanting words of wild Valyrian, embers drifting from her fingertips. Ghost ran ahead, carving a trail through the deepening drifts. Behind them, the Night King watched, expressionless. He lifted both arms. The fallen, watchmen, wildlings, bear knights, stormlanders rose in jerky silence, eyes igniting blue. Lyanna Mormont's shattered pieces fused, and she stepped forth, mace dangling from stiff fingers. The Night King turned south, and his army followed, now swollen by the very men sworn to stop them. On the highroad to Winterfell, the refugees trudged through knee-deep snow. Above, skylights danced, curtains of green, blue, and violet flaring across the heavens, beautiful, unnatural. Children cried at the cold, at the sounds of distant horns echoing like mourning wails. Behind, a straight line of blue torches approached, closing the distance with tireless inevitability. Jon rode at the column's rear, eyes burning from exhaustion. He counted the survivors, less than 800 out of near 4,000 souls who had stood at Castle Black 2 days prior. Among them, only 40 giants remained, and they mourned in low, thunderous keening, carrying their fallen in frozen bundles draped with mammoth hides. Stannis' commanders debated whether to fortify at the last river or push for the Umber's seat at last hearth, but scouts returned with tales of dead ravaging those lands already. They argued next for a stand at the ruins of Queen's Crown, yet Melisandre foretold firestorms of ice there. At last, with no choice, they headed for Winterfell. The castle's gray towers loomed from the snow like the ribs of some fossilized beast. Smoke rose in slender plumes, the Boltons yet held it. When their riders saw Baratheon banners, they barred the gates and manned the battlements. Stannis dismounted before the heavy oak doors, voice booming. "Open in the name of the true king and for the salvation of the realm." Ramsay Bolton's laughter drifted from the ramparts. "We prefer living, thank you. You, however, are welcome to freeze." He lifted a sack and spilled its contents. Heads rolled across the stone, Karstark riders who had attempted parley. "Take your war elsewhere." Snow gusted thicker, blue haze on the horizon. Stannis' knuckles whitened on his sword. "Bolton, your pride will doom us all." Ramsay grinned. "A flayed man fears no ghost. Then you are greater fools than ever I feared." Stannis turned to Jon. "Can we breach?" Jon studied the walls. Winterfell had resisted sieges for 8,000 years. He shook his head. Melisandre stepped forward. "Fire opens all doors," she whispered. She placed a hand to the oak. Flames blossomed, red and gold, licking the wood. Yet as the heat rose, frost formed on her skin, spreading like veins of crystal. She recoiled in pain. The fire died. Inside, Roose Bolton's measured voice replaced his son's. "Lord Stannis, the North remembers betrayal. Yet even betrayal pales before oblivion. You may enter under condition you yield command of your host to House Bolton. The king in the North must be of the North." Stannis' jaw clenched. Jon laid a hand on his arm. "Swallow pride. We cannot stand in the open." Stannis closed his eyes, breathing heavily. "So be it. I will yield until the dead are ash." The gates creaked, slow as glaciers. Refugees poured in, black brothers, wildlings, knights, giants. Winterfell's courtyards filled with clamor, horse steam, clank of armor. Above, the broken direwolf of House Stark hung beside the flayed man. Jon entered last. As the gates shut with a final boom, he looked north. A wall of darkness crawled across the tundra, studded with ice-blue fires. It would reach Winterfell by dawn. He whispered a silent plea to any gods that still listened. The Night King had broken the world's first defense. Winterfell might be the last. In the crypts deep beneath the castle, Bran Stark's vision arrived before him. He walked unseen between the carved kings of winter, through dust older than empire. He sensed his mother's statue, cold hands folded above stone direwolf. He sensed his father's eyes closed in serene warning. And below them he felt ancient bones stirring, souls restless. The kings of winter had sworn a vow across millennia. "We stand against the long night." Their silence asked, "Will those of living blood fail where only stone remembers?" Bran reached out with his mind. The weirwood roots threading the crypt trembled. He whispered to them, begged them. The roots answered, pulsing red sap like heart's blood through the frozen earth. Far above, the heart tree's eyes wept fresh tears that did not freeze. And in the night outside the walls, snowflakes paused in their fall, as if listening. Dawn broke false, lightless, bruised purple. The Night King's army ringed Winterfell, a sea of still bodies stretching to every horizon. Beneath the battlements, Jon and Ramsay shared the parapet. Loathing mingled with fear. Giants of the dead stood side by side with undead mammoths, tusks razored short by time. An ice dragon, serpentine wings brittle and glassy, coiled behind the host, blood vessels glowing neon beneath translucent scale. Its breath misted in clouds that formed perfect crystals before shattering. Stannis paced the courtyard, inspecting lines of pikemen, archers on the roofs, barrels of pitch. Davos, pale and weak but upright, offered quiet advice. Melisandre knelt by a brazier, eyes closed, praying to a dawn that would not come. Roose Bolton ascended the ramparts. "They outnumber us 100 to 1, he said without preamble. "Our walls will delay, not save." "Walls delay long enough for hope," Jon answered, gripping Longclaw. The Valyrian steel felt heavier than ever. The Night King rode forward alone until the trench of wildfire Stannis' men had set sputtered between them. He regarded the castle with ancient contempt. Then he lifted his spear and plunged it into the ground. Ice rippled outward in concentric rings. The wildfire. Trench sizzled, flame shrinking, green light dimming until only a hiss of smoke remained. A corridor of melted snow formed, leading straight to Winterfell's gate. The Night King dismounted and began to walk. Jon lifted his sword. Stannis stepped beside him with his own blade, Lightbringer aflame though the wind sought to snuff it. Ramsay unslung his crossbow, eyes narrowed in sudden terror. Giants roared from the towers. Melisandre opened her eyes, rubies blazing. The first battle's scream rose as the ice dragon launched skyward, wings beating thunder. Stannis shouted, "Loose!" Arrows lit with oil streaked upward. Bolts of dragoglass flew from scorpions. The air filled with swirling embers, shards of frost, splinters of bone. And the wall's fall echoed again in memory, louder, as Winterfell braced to become the last bulwark of the living. The trap Stannis devised was simple. Lure the Night King into the courtyard, surround with wildfire, strike with Valyrian steel and dragoglass. But the Night King must be drawn inside. For that, a champion needed to face him at the gate, a duel to bait his pride. Jon volunteered. No one else did. Before noon, as snow fell sideways in sheets, Jon stepped through the half-open gate. The world outside was silent save for the endless hiss of wind. Corpses parted, forming an aisle toward their master. The Night King waited, spear humming with inner frost fire. Jon's breath plumed silver. He lowered Longclaw in salute. The Night King tilted his head, mirroring the gesture. For a heartbeat, they regarded one another, the living and the death-made flesh, children of old magic in opposing truths. They met with a clash that cracked the stillness like thunder. Longclaw rang against the ice spear, sparks of red and blue scattering. Jon felt the bite of cold through his gauntlet, flesh icing. He rolled aside, slashed low. The spear spun, deflecting. The Night King moved with preternatural grace, every strike measured, inevitable. Jon fought on instinct, recalling Sirio's dancing lessons, Corran's brutal feints, Donal Noy's hammer-heavy smashes. But each memory was a candle before the moon. He faltered. The spear grazed his thigh, pain flared, but worse was the cold spreading inward. Ghost, beyond the gate, howled. The Night King lifted his arm for a killing thrust. A horn blared from the towers. The gate yawned open. Stannis charged astride a destrier shrouded in fire. Lightbringer flashed crimson. He swung with all a Soldier King's fury. The Night King turned, parried, frost meeting flame in a shriek of steam. Wine-red sparks rained on snow sizzling. Jon pushed away, staggering. Behind him, hidden scorpions cranked. Archer lines fired dragon-glass broadheads. The Night King danced through them, untouched, every step measured like dripping water. Melisandre raised her arms atop the gatehouse. She spoke a word in a voice older than the wall itself. Wildfire erupted in rings around the courtyard, emerald walls trapping the combatants. Heat scorched Jon's face, the Night King's cloak steamed. Stannis pressed, Lightbringer blazing. The Night King caught the sword's edge in a gauntlet of ice, frost racing along the steel, dimming the fire. Stannis snarled, forcing power into the blade. The fire flared again. Ice cracked. Yet the Night King's eyes glowed brighter. Snow whirled upward, tornadoing. The wildfire guttered, starved of air. In the swirling gloom, Jon saw a silhouette, pitch horns, massive wings. The ice dragon plunged from the clouds, jaws yawning wide. It spewed frost fire that shattered arrow slits, froze shingles, smothered braziers. Men screamed as limbs iced solid, snapped under weight of armor. Giants hurled boulders, but they shattered on the dragon's hide. One giant leapt, axes raised, but the dragon's tail whipped, sending him tumbling through 3 towers. Inside the ring, Stannis faltered as the wind stole breath. The Night King shattered Lightbringer with a single swing, shards of fiery steel scattered like dying meteors. Stannis dropped to one knee, gauntlet fingers bleeding ice. Jon sprinted, ignoring pain. He dove, taking Stannis's arm, dragging him toward the gate. The wildfire ring collapsed as wind roared. Corpses surged through the gap. Ramsay, seeing the breach, ordered the inner gate sealed. Jon screamed for them to wait, but the portcullis fell, iron teeth clanging. Jon and Stannis were trapped outside, ghost with them, the dead closing. The Night King stepped over broken stone, spear leveled. Jon pushed Stannis behind him. He knew this end, no songs, just snow. And then a deep rumble shook the earth. Stone cracked beneath Winterfell. The night itself shivered. The heart tree's roots burst upward, whitewood twisting like serpents. They smashed through courtyard flagstones, through the walls, forming a barrier of living, bleeding oak. Within the breach, a voice echoed Bran's voice, but layered with older timbers as though every Stark who had ever lived spoke with him. Winterfell is not yours, the voice said. The North is not yours. The roots lunged at the Night King. He slashed, and frost burned the wood, but the heart tree bled sap that steamed like boiling water. The roots coiled, dragging him back. Jon felt the air hum with ancient power, the old gods rising for their chosen ground. The ice dragon shrieked, climbing. Bran's power could not reach the sky, but a primal roar answered from the south. Dragonfire, hot and gold, scythed through clouds. From the direction of the Dreadfort soared a great beast of black scales and red eyes. Drogon, and upon him rode Daenerys Targaryen with her Khalasar of Unsullied behind, banners snapping crimson. Fire met ice above Winterfell, turning the sky to steam. Night deepened. The living and dead clashed beneath unnatural auroras of blue and red. Jon fought until arms numbed, watching giants wrestle giants, dragons weave death in arcs of fire and frost. When he could no longer stand, he fell beside Stannis, blood crystallizing in his beard. In the half-light he saw Ramsay, crazed grin frozen, arrowing crossbow bolts indiscriminately. A skeletal giant crushed him beneath one dying foot. Roose Bolton vanished in a wave of dead frays. Melisandre burned like a torch, hair aflame, laughing and weeping as she unleashed torrents of scarlet fire that cost her strips of soul with every breath. And still the Night King advanced, wrapped in writhing roots, dragging them as though they weighed nothing. Bran's power faltered at the edge of exhaustion. The Night King emerged into the inner ward, spear lifted. Drogon swooped, Daenerys guiding him in a dive that shook the ramparts. Flame roared. The Night King strode through, untouched. He launched the spear. It pierced Drogon's chest. The great dragon screamed, veered wildly, crashing through a tower in a storm of masonry. Daenerys tumbled into snow, blood streaking her brow. Jon cried her name. He hobbled to her, dragging Longclaw like dead weight. Ghost circled, snarling. The Night King raised a hand. Shadows around Daenerys stirred as dead Winterfell soldiers rose, eyes blue. Jon placed himself between her and the dead. Each breath felt like glass in his lungs. A broken shard of Lightbringer lay by Stannis' still form. Jon seized it. Though quenched, a faint ember lingered. The Night King stepped closer. Jon held Longclaw in one hand, Lightbringer's shard in the other. He crossed the blades. Something stirred inside him. Some old, stubborn part of Stark and Targaryen blood meeting ancient steel. The ember in the shard flared, ran along Longclaw's edge. Valyrian glyphs glowed red. Heat flooded Jon's veins. He roared, sound half-wolf, half-man. He charged. Blade met spear. Red fire clashed with blue frost, lightning of molten white exploding. The Night King staggered, first time. Jon pressed, remembered every face lost, PYP, Gren, Lyanna, Davos, and fed his fury into the blade. Steel bit icy armor, cracks spidered. The Night King's eyes widened fractionally. He thrust frost fire through Jon's chest. Pain vanished in cold ecstasy. Jon's vision dimmed. He plunged Longclaw through the Night King's breast, driving the ember shard with it. Fire and ice met in the wound. A high-pitched screech, thin and inhuman, sliced the night. The Night King convulsed. Blue light poured from the cracks. Jon felt himself falling into snow. Ghost's howl rent the air. The Night King exploded. Shards of ice, cold blue flame shot skyward. Dead collapsed, strings cut, eyes dark. The ice dragon crumbled midair, wings disintegrating in glittering rain. Whites shattered like brittle pottery. Silence swept the battlefield, profound. Snow began to fall softly, gently. The auroras faded, revealing a black sky peppered with distant stars. In the courtyard, survivors emerged from rubble, dazed. Stannis crawled to Jon's side. Melisandre joined, eyes hollow, embers dying from her throat. Daenerys knelt, tears cutting clean tracks through soot. Jon's eyes fluttered, unfocused. You fought, Stannis rasped. Jon's lips twitched. I'm tired. Daenerys clasped his hand, warmth leeching. You saved us. Jon's breath caught, shallow. He looked at her as though seeing dawn. Then his chest stilled. Ghost lay his muzzle upon Jon's shoulder, keening low. Snow drifted, white upon black fur. Bran, deep in the weirwood, felt the tether snap. He whispered a last thanks. Morning came crimson. Fires burned the dead before they could rise anew. The living gathered, Baratheon knights, northern men, wildlings unsullied, around a cairn of stone for those who had fallen. Davos, arm in sling, recited the knights' names. Many voices answered. Many names remained unspoken forever, known only to gods. Stannis limped to the battlements where Melisandre watched the horizon. Is it over? She shook her head, red hair dull. No. The Night King is gone, but winter remains. Darkness yet lingers in men's hearts. The long night ends only when the last flame dies, or when all hearts burn bright. Stannis frowned. Riddles. Truths. She met his gaze. but for today we live. And that is victory. Below, Daenerys knelt beside Jon's bier, long claw laid across his chest. She whispered a song in Valyrian. Her breath misted in the cold, yet tears steamed on her cheeks. Drogon, wings bound in bandages, rumbled soft notes of mourning. Tormund placed a hand on her shoulder. He was a good lad. She nodded. The best. In the weirwood, Bran felt a stirring. Not the Night King's cold, but something gentler, a spark, faint but stubborn. He reached for it, cupped it like a fledgling flame. Far away, in the silent crypt, the heart tree's roots wrapped Jon Snow's lifeless form, drawing him into earth older than memory, cradling him in quiet, green darkness. Sap, warm and sweet, trickled along frozen skin. A seedling truth took root there, slow, patient. Winter had broken the wall, but the story of the living was not yet done. In the deep places where magic sleeps, death is only one verse of an endless song. And even the coldest night must yield, for somewhere, distant, unseen, the first ember of spring had already begun to glow. Sequel. Smoke curled over Winterfell long after the last corpse fires guttered out, drifting through broken arches and arrow-slit windows in pale ribbons that stung the eyes and carried the iron-sweet tang of char. Beneath the gauzy haze, the fortress felt hollowed, halls echoing with the hush that follows screaming. A single raven rasped from a blackened merlin and then took flight, vanishing into a sky the color of bleached slate, winter's noon, bright yet bloodless. Inside the ruined great hall, benches were shoved against cracked walls, making space for rows of straw pallets. The wounded lay shoulder to shoulder, Stormlanders with frost-burned faces, black brothers coughing up ice, unsullied rigid-backed despite jagged spears of crystal still embedded in their cuirasses. Maester Tybalt and what remained of the castle's healers moved among them, doling willow bark, wine, and quiet mercy where needed. Through it all drifted Gilly, holding little Sam to her breast, singing lullabies too soft for the moans around her, but loud enough, perhaps, for the old gods below to hear. Davos Seaworth sat propped against a toppled pillar, cloak double beneath him, head bandaged where a shard of frost blade had grazed him. His one remaining hand gripped a roll of parchment, casualty tallies scrawled in haste. He read and reread them until the numbers blurred, willing another column of ink to transform loss into miracle. It never did. He lowered the parchment and watched Daenerys Targaryen stride through the hall's far doors, a wake of cold air following her. Her leathers were scorched, a swath of linen bound her ribs. Ash clung to the silver river of her hair. Yet she moved like a blade freshly honed, straight-backed, eyes forward, every step purposeful. Unsullied guards bowed as she passed. Her gaze searched the palace until it found Davos. She knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder as though they were old comrades. "How fares the king?" she asked, meaning Stannis. "Alive," Davos rasped. "Less attentive than a stubborn mule, more stubborn than a wounded boar. He cannot lift his sword arm, but insists on touring the ramparts at dusk. Says a king must be seen." He shook his head. "He'll reopen the wound if he keeps on. I will speak with him." Daenerys's tone carried equal parts respect and command, an empress humoring a fractious tributary. "But before that I must find the wolf." Davos followed her gaze east, toward the inner bailey where makeshift scaffolds encircled the lone tower still burning from dragon fire. There, an honor guard of wildlings stood watch, Tormund Giantsbane, the Spearwives Longfoot and Ragna Treekiller, even the grizzled giant 1-1, each keeping vigil for Lord Snow. Beyond them, the weirwood's pale limbs reached skyward through a torn roof, bleeding sap the color of rust. "No one's allowed near him," Davos said gently. "Not yet. Maester Tybalt says the body's changed." Daenerys met his gaze, neither angry nor pleading, merely certain. "Lord Snow gave his life to save mine. If there is any breath left in him, I must stand beside it." She stood. Her guards shifted but did not bar her path. She crossed the hall, brushing past stretchers and fire wagons, boot heels clicking on broken tile. When she reached the courtyard, wind howled between shattered battlements, carrying ghost snow that stung like sand. Dragons roared overhead, regal and Viserion circling the ruined tower where Drogon nursed his wound. Their cries were sharper than hunger, yet softer than fury, a keening lament for their wounded sibling and fallen brother rider. Tormund stepped into Daenerys's path. His fox fur mantle fluttered, revealing mail crusted with dried gore. "Queen O' Dragons," he greeted, tipping an imaginary horn. "The crow sleeps in roots now. The trees have him. I would see him," she said. The wildling giant rubbed icicle-rimed whiskers. "You can look, aye, if you've a mind for sorrow. But touch? The old gods bite. Even I feel am gnawing." He lifted a wrist, red welts ringed it where bark had brushed skin. "Bran says it's how they weave the boy back together." Bran? The name was unfamiliar on her tongue. Stark warg, little lord with the broken legs. Lives under the tower roots. Tormund shrugged as if that explained all. He's the one binding ghost to snow, wood to bone. Daenerys ducked beneath the scaffold, careful of protruding nails. The weirwood's roots split the flagstones, forming a dark cradle around Jon's bier. He lay upon a litter of black wool and dire wolf hide. The wounds in his chest and thigh were stitched with thread that glittered like moonlight and crusted over with pink sap. His face was waxen, lips blue pale, but unrest, eyelids twitching, breath fluttering imperceptibly. Ghost curled beside him, muzzle pressed to Jon's collarbone, white pelt streaked with soot. Bran sat cross-legged on a thick root above Jon's head, eyes rolled white, veins standing out like blue cords along his neck. Leaf, the last of the children, knelt opposite, humming an almost bird-like tune, tiny fingers glowing faint green against Jon's brow. Bran's voice emerged, distant, layered. The ice is deep, deeper than I feared. I must dredge the river, find the man beneath. Daenerys folded to her knees in the snow, heedless of cold. She took Jon's limp hand in hers. You will not drown him. He is winter's child, but fire moves in him too. Bran's eyelids fluttered. He is both, yes, but neither will yield. His body trembled as though battered by unseen current. Sweat beaded on his brow. Help me. She looked to Leaf. The child shook her head. Not with green. Dragon must answer dragon. Daenerys closed her eyes, summoning a memory of searing scale beneath her palms, of heartbeats that thundered like drums. She inhaled slow, exhaled slower. In her breast, something thrummed, an echo of that living furnace that had once awakened and scathed from Khal Drogo's pyre. She pressed Jon's hand against her sternum, beneath scorched leather, and breathed. Heat spread from her core, racing down her arm into Jon's cold skin. Frost hissed as it melted. Sap cracked. A tendril of steam rose. Ghost growled softly but did not lift his head. Bran gasped, spine arching. Leaf chanted higher. Roots tightened around the bier, creaking. Jon's chest convulsed. A rasping breath escaped him. His eyes flew open, not blue, not milky, but dark gray, wild and confused. He tried to sit, agony folded him back. Daenerys kept his shoulders down, tears stinging. He whispered a single word, hot. She almost laughed. Bran collapsed, vision clearing, pupils narrowing to slits before returning. He wiped blood from his nose. He's back, he croaked. He will live, if the wall within mends. Jon's gaze found Daenerys. Recognition dawned, then grief. He reached to the wound in his chest. Long claw, safe, she assured. And the Night King. Jon shut his eyes. Gone. But the others. His fingers clenched around hers with surprising strength. Whites fell. Walkers shattered. But death's tide can rise again if men forget and the world grows cold. Leaf's head tilted. The heart remembers. We will remind it. That night, a council gathered in the solar of the broken tower. Lords and captains, maesters and magicians, each perched on warped chairs dragged from storerooms and bedchambers. The round table was absent, replaced by a map of the north nailed across a broad board of spruce. Charcoal marks sketched the Night King's march. A black arrow from the shivering sea through shattered Eastwatch, a wide shadow sweeping south to Winterfell. Smaller marks, red, noted wildling villages burned, castles deserted, holds swallowed by snow. Stannis sat nearest the map, arm in sling, face gone. Melisandre hovered behind, her hair shorn short where fire had burned it. To Stannis' left sat Roose Bolton, visage blank marble. To his right, Daenerys, armored in blued steel, sigil cloak draped across her lap. Beside her huddled Tyrion Lannister, brought north aboard a supply wagon, hair silver with frost, eyes bright with schemes. Jon arrived last, walking stiffly between Bran and Tormund, ghost padding ahead. Scars were visible through the gap of an unbuttoned tunic, sap still wept slow drops that steamed where they fell. Conversation hushed at his entry. Ramsay was not present, his body had been consigned to the corpse pits with the other flayed men. Shall we begin? Stannis rasped. Tyrion flicked a quill, dropping ink where Winterfell's gates had once stood. We possess, by rough count, 5,000 souls capable of bearing arms. Supplies can feed perhaps 6,000 mouths 3 weeks if rationed. After that famine, the harvests ruined, fields froze under necromancy. Roose tapped a linen-wrapped knuckle. We could send wagons south past Moat Cailin, gather grain from White Harbor, the Bar Rollins, even the Reach, if the Manderleys still live. Moat's causeways half sunk, Davos objected. Dead clogged the marsh and left rot behind. Wagons would mire. We might sail, Tyrion mused, then grimaced. But the white knife ice as thick as northern patience. Daenerys's fist tightened. Dragons could carry small loads, but not enough. Rhaegal and Viserion grow each day, yet they cannot cart a city's stores. Jon leaned against Ghost, fatigue etched into his shoulders. We hold Winterfell, but cannot outlast a second winter of death. Our only hope lies south, warming lands, untainted soil. We must march. All of us. Roos's brows rose a fraction. Abandon the ancestral seat of House Stark? The pledge of Winter Kings? What is a seat without those sworn to it? Jon countered. Bran spoke, voice quiet yet certain. Winds blow stranger now. I rode them last night. The death that walked in ice could walk again, though not soon. Its heart is broken, but hearts mend. If we linger, we give it time. Melisandre's gaze flickered flame-like. The boy sees truth. The great other still breeds across the world, seeking form. We must ride for sunlight while it flees. Stannis exhaled needle-sharp breath. The Iron Throne waits for prince or pretender. I had thought to claim it with northern steel, but I will not sit a throne of bones. His sling creaked as his hand clenched. We march then. South. With whose banners? Roose asked. The Boltons rule the north by law of crown. My crown, Stannis snapped. Which lies unbroken. Daenerys' smile was winter-thin. A crown untested is as fragile as frost. And I too lay claim on birth and on fire. Tension crackled brighter than hellfire. Jon stepped between them. The living have one war now, survival. Kings may fight when summer returns. Swear it. Stannis' jaw flexed. I swear until the long night is dust. Daenerys inclined her head. And I. Let our quarrel wait until children laugh in green fields again. Tyrion dipped quill in ink. One alliance forged of necessity. A mirage perhaps, but we shall drink the shining sands while we can. They spent hours dividing columns, listing stores, arguing over the route. King's Road or Coast Road, direct or staggered. By Candle's Gutter they reached plan. Within 7 days every soul willing would depart Winterfell, bound south first to White Harbor, thence by ships begged, borrowed or taken, toward Dragonstone or Storm's End, whichever harbor lay open. Garrison would remain, 200 volunteers led by Maester Tybald and a grim-faced 1-1, to tend wounded too weak to ride and to guard Winterfell's archives, perhaps someday to rekindle the north when Green returned. As the council broke, Bran caught Jon's sleeve. The roots whisper still. They say your heart beats half in snow, half in ember. Tend both. If either fades, you'll unravel again. Jon managed a weary smile. I'll trudge on ice and build fires where I can. The week that followed felt stolen from time. Men and women hauled sacks from pantries, salted remaining meats, dried turnips over braziers, forged scrapers to shear frozen moss for the desperate. Stable boys fitted new shoes to mounts that trembled at dragon cries overhead. Cripples learned to ride sledges pulled by shaggy northern elk. Of blacksmiths there were precious few, most had perished in the breach, yet their hammers rang day and night, shaping rough spearheads from scavenged harrows, mending shattered shields with mismatched rivets. Daenerys spent evenings with Drogon. The great beast lay in the central yard, ribs banded with copper plates to steady cracked sternum. Chain loops suspended his left wing in gentle tension. He accepted the indignity with patient growls, allowing only her touch near the wounded membrane. Rhaegal and Viserion roost on the rookery, hissing at any who approached save Bran, who climbed the scaffold one dust to rest a palm on Viserion's snout, as rolling white as he whispered scents of green summer meadows the dragon had never seen. Jon split hours between drill yards and Godwood. He sparred with unsullied phalanxes, reacquainting muscles turned sluggish by death. The sap-stitched wound burned each time he swung, yet the weirwood roots seemed to knit tighter with effort, as though welcoming strain. At night he knelt before the heart tree, feeling it pulse faint heat through its frosted bark. Ghost always kept watch, red eyes reflecting candle glow like coals. On the 6th evening, as scarlet dusk bled over ramparts, Samwell Tarly returned. He arrived atop a bedraggled Garren, cheeks wind-cracked, spectacles iced. He tumbled from the saddle, embraced Jon, weeping. "You live," Sam sobbed. "They said you, but I hoped." Jon clasped him tight. "I live, just." He pulled back. "How did you survive?" Sam's voice trembled. "Cold hands led us south through the forest, keeping one step ahead of the dead. We reached Queen's Crown ruins, found a cache of blackfire powder left by first men, burned a path through whites. Gilly and the babe are safe with Maester Tybalt. He hesitated. Colehans stayed north. He said someone must watch the melting ice, gather truths the living forget. Jon nodded, throat thick. There were debts that could not be repaid. Sam drew a scroll from his coat. I copied old records from the library before Eastwatch fell, maps of Valyrian roads, notes on dragon lore, and fragments about the Dawn Age. For Bran. For you. Jon accepted it. Words within would be seeds for future battles, perhaps. He thanked him and sent him to warm fires. Departure day dawned beneath purple bands of aurora that shimmered despite direct sunlight. Some named it an omen, good or ill depending on which god they favored. The column stretched half a league beyond the broken gate, cavalry at 4 foot in center, wagons and sledges astern. Giants lumbered alongside, dragging carts carved from bowls of weirwood. Their cargo was barrels of sap to be distilled into salves Bran had decreed. Dragons soared overhead, wings casting vast shadows that made men shiver and yet stand taller. Stannis rode in mail of black lacquered steel, cloak of Baratheon gold. Beside him trotted Davos, face set in stoic resolve though every bump sent pain through half-healed ribs. Daenerys astride a white mare kept easy pace, Tyrion at her left, joking about the wisdom of putting 2 claimants to a realm within sword's reach. She smiled but did not answer. At the gate Jon turned for one last look. Winterfell's towers stood like broken spears against a bruised sky. Smoke still rose from the library spire where scribes copied tomes by firelight. Maester Tybalt waved from the battlements, one leaned on a fallen bell tower like an old man on a cane. Bran's silhouette perched upon the highest parapet, cloak whipping about stick-thin limbs, eyes on horizons unseen. Jon lifted his hand. Bran raised his in return. No words passed, none were needed. Ghost barked, urging forward. Jon spurred his mare. The horns blew thrice, long and low, and the living left Winterfell behind. They marched through drifts that swallowed ankles, through forests where every trunk was scored by frost burn, sap having frozen and burst bark in grotesque patterns. They passed last river towns where no smoke rose, yet no dead stirred either, silent emptiness that felt somehow worse. Manderly cavalry joined them near the White Knife Delta, bringing salted cod and rumors. Aegon Targaryen had landed at Griffin's Roost with Golden Company. Queen Cersei still held King's Landing, her new hand a cunning alchemist rumored to raise wildfire from stone. Highgarden lay in siege between Tarly loyalists and rebel Beesbury levies. Tyrion remarked, while we saved the world, the rest of it contrived new ways to bleed. Jon only shook his head. Men forgot fast. At White Harbor, Lord Wyman greeted them upon the city ice wall with tears streaming into his beard. He pledged shipsu, 30 cogs and 5 carracks, to ferry refugees down coast. Food stores were scant, but fish thronged the frozen bay, and within days smokehouses filled with herring. Dragons hunted whales beyond the bay's rim, bringing back carcasses longer than galleys. The city's children carved ribs into sled runners. The blubber fed fires that otherwise would have died for lack of wood. It took 2 weeks to load, during which Daenerys and Stannis argued daily over embarkation order, troop distribution, and command hierarchy. Their tempers iced thin, then shattered. Yet each night they signed identical orders, sealing them side by side. Tyrion called it a dance, each step precise, avoiding toes but never embracing. Jon spent evenings among fishermen, listening to stories, learning currents between islands. Sam labored in the archive tower, cross-referencing tide tables with Valyrian charts. He discovered a note. Dragonstone's waters warmed each spring by volcanic vents. In those months Leviathan spawned, making sailing perilous. The note's date, 3 centuries prior, gave pause, but Sam insisted currents seldom shifted. Tyrion suggested they anchor at Gulltown instead, then ride the Ares mountain passes to reach the King's Road south. March again? Stannis balked. Daenerys shrugged, her dragons could scout whichever path the fleet chose. Amid debate, news arrived by Raven. The Vale had barred gates against Northern Plague. Lord Baelish spoke for young Lord Aaron, demanding evidence the refugees bore no curse. Stannis spat. Daenerys ordered parchment, penned a note offering alliance sealed in dragonfire. The Raven returned burned feathers, only Baelish's answer. In council that night, Roose Bolton shifted tokens across a map. If Gulltown denies landing, Dragonstone remains sole haven. The narrow sea seldom freezes. The current Samwell notes may hinder, but better whales than walls. Davos agreed. I sailed those waters half a life. With luck and following wind, cogs'll beat the spawn. Decision made, They embarked at dawn. Jon rowed the final barge, Ghost seated grandly upon a coil of rope, eyes scanning fog. Sam vomited overboard as the city slipped behind, towers dwindling to frost-pricked silhouettes. Seas proved mercurial. First came calm waters beneath pale sun, ships gliding like ghosts. Then sudden squalls flung sleet sideways, halyards freezing stiff. Regal and Viserion flew ahead, clearing ice with blasts of fire, though each burst boiled sea spray into scalding mist that singed sailors. More than once crew cursed demon WRMS, until unsullied spears convinced them silence was wiser. On the 13th day, whales surfaced among the fleet, massive mottled backs, barnacled ridges, dragon's dove, white fume trailing jaws, and seabirds wheeled screaming. The largest whale breached within a spear's cast of Daenerys' flagship Windsinger, spouting crimson mist. Dragonfire had pierced lung. The carcass drifted and sharks congregated. Sailors whispered that the sea drank its own for winter's citadel. Fog closed on the 14th night. Jon, pacing deck, felt cold deeper than salt air, a prickle beneath scars. He closed eyes, listening. No wind, no wave slap, only hush. Memory of the Night King's silence. He gripped rail. Ghost's hackles rose. From murk emerged faint lights, blue as glacier heart. 1, then 3, then a dozen. They hovered horizontal, matching fleet's pace. Jon shouted alarm. Bells clanged. Archers readied flaming arrows, but cords snapped frozen. The lights drifted nearer until silhouettes resolved. Ships, longships of old Valyrian make, hulls black glass, sails of woven night. No crew walked decks, yet rudders moved. Tyrion, squinting through spyglass, muttered, "Ghost fleet." Daenerys climbed quarterdeck, Drogon circling overhead though still unable to breathe full flame. She commanded the dragons to ready. Regal and Viserion banked, roars muffled by fog. The Ghost fleet halted abeam the vanguard carrack, then burst into blue flame from prow to stern, a silent conflagration that shed no heat yet burned wood to ash in heartbeats. Sailors screamed as rigging collapsed, though no sparks touched them. Within moments, only a hull of frost remained, which cracked and sank. Jon's eyes tore wide. The Night King is dead. Davos's voice trembled, but his sorcery lingers. Windless fire. Melisandre, pale as parchment, appeared. The other's hand was severed, yet shards remain lodged in the world. They drift like splinters seeking flesh. She pointed to glowing water where sunken ship vanished. We sail upon cursed veins. We need flame greater than his memory. Drogon landed upon Windsinger's deck, claws crunching timber. Daenerys mounted. She guided him into a slow circle above the phantom ships. Fog parted under his wing beats. She drew deep breath, urging him to do the same. Bran, though leagues distant, felt the dragon's hearts. In White Harbor's archives he had studied scrolls of dragonglass, learning Valyrian runes that coaxed deeper flame. Now he closed his eyes, sending a whisper along windways Lawler himself could not chart. Breathe deeper. Reach the fire beneath the sea. Drogon's furnace responded. Flame erupted, golden white, hotter than any preceding. Summer sun caged. It washed over the ghost hulls. Blue fire shrieked, warped, then died. Glass melted, sails dissolved. Cleansed, the sea rolled gray again. Yet the eruption cracked Drogon's wounded rib. Pain lanced. The dragon faltered, dipping dangerously close to mastheads before regaining height. Daenerys steadied him, but blood dripped from scale gaps, sizzling where it fell. Tyrion shouted for surgeons. They tethered the dragon to Windsinger aside with winch chains rigged for siege engines, lowered a sling of sailcloth. While healers packed the wound with warmed resin, Daenerys remained astride, whispering Valyrian lullabies. Drogon's growls softened to rumble, great eyes half-lidded. The fleet regrouped at dawn. 2 ships lost, 50 souls drowned or devoured by sharks drawn to the battle. Yet the ghost fleet had been undone. Fog thinned and salty breeze carried scent of pine. Mountains rose ahead, Dragonstone's ragged peaks, green-black against pallid sky, volcanic plumes spiraling. A sound met them, thunderous surf, and beneath it, faintly, bells. Davos let breath he hadn't known he held. Home, he whispered. Dragonstone's courtyard filled with refugees shivering beneath basalt arches, staring at carved dragons that glared back with gemstone eyes. Red priests who'd fled King's Landing greeted Melisandre with bowed heads. They ushered wounded into birthing chambers converted to infirmaries, lighting braziers scented with myrrh. Castle stewards wove through throngs, offering bowls of clam stew and room-temperature wine. Stannis convened council in the stone drum's war room. No longer porous to the wind, torches flared bright yellow. Painted table glowed under lamplight, Westeros rendered in sweeping relief. The north lay covered in white lacquer now, as if the wood itself had felt the long night's touch. Southlands showed fresh pins, gold lion for Lannister south of Blackwater, sigil of a manticore marking Aegon's foothold, rose at Highgarden overlaid by Tarly's sword, chaos of claims. Tyrion stepped onto stool for vantage. Think of Westeros as patient after grievous wound, fever raging in every organ. We, physicians, must decide which infection bleeds first. Daenerys traced finger along King's Road to capital. Cersei must fall. Her cruelty births fear stronger than any white. But Stormlanders follow Stannis. I could sweep south with dragons, but they are maimed. She looked to Jon. And you? Jon met her gaze. His hair, once raven, now streaked white at temples, a gift of death's brush. I ride where living need walls. The riverlands burn, bandits reaping smallfolk. We secure grain fields, feed the realm. Empty bellies serve any devil that offers bread. Feed them, they'll fight for daylight. Roose Bolton sneered faintly. You would be lord of turnips while crowns glitter? A crown of grain outlasts gold, Jon answered. Melisandre spoke, voice echoing strangely. The Lord of Light shows fires dividing dragon fire, wildfire, starfire. 3 paths. Choose one, the others smolder. Tyrion rubbed brow. Interpretation, we cannot chase every foe. So, Daenerys and Stannis break King's Landing. Jon secures Heartland, Bolton. He paused. Roose's eyes chilled. The Dreadfort keeps North's vigil. Should ice rise again, we will answer. Quiet settled, heavy as sealing wax. Decisions forged not in unity but compromise, yet forged. That night on Dragonstone's beach, Jon lit a driftwood pyre. Waves lapped black sand, moon reflecting brokenly. Ghost lay by his feet, nose twitching at briny wind. Jon tossed a scrap of dire wolf hide atop flames, remnants of his death shroud. Fire caught, dancing blue where sap stained cloth. He watched until embers floated skyward, joining stars. Footsteps crunched. Daenerys approached, cloak of red silk trailing drift lines. She joined him wordless, eyes on pyre. At length she said, when the Night King pierced Drogon, I thought I would die. But your sacrifice saved him and me. Now he lives, yet you lost life to bring him back. How do I repay that? Jon considered. Liveworthy. He nudged charred stick, revealing glowing coal. If we survive storm ahead, live so the world you rule never forgets what death taught. She turned toward him, moonlight silvering her hair. And you? What do you want? He hesitated. To walkwoods where snowfields bloom. Hear children laugh among evergreens. See a world where fear is memory. He chuffed. Tall order. She smiled, small but bright. Then we share a dream. Silence save gull cries. Daenerys offered a hand. He took it, scarred fingers interlacing. Fire crackled softer now, settling into embers, light casting their shadows together across sand. Above, auroras faded, replaced by first true stars of spring. No blue glow haunted horizon. Sea breathed, tide hushed. They stood until dawn tinged clouds pink, and in that hush both felt, faint but sure, that the night which had shattered the wall was finally yielding, not vanquished entirely, perhaps never could be, but set to drifting dreams. Ahead lay wars of crowns and hearts, betrayals and triumphs, yet those would be forged in sunlight. And sunlight, they vowed, would never again be taken for granted. Behind them, in Dragonstone's courtyard, Bran Stark woke from a dream of green fields unfurling across hard northern rock, of ice rivers shrinking under gentle warmth, of a single white flower pushing through snow at Winterfell's heart tree roots. He smiled, for the wheel still turned, but seeds planted in darkness had begun, at last, to seek tea. He sun. PGSQL. Sea spray glittered like frost in dawnlight as the fleet rocked at anchor beneath the basalt cliffs of Dragonstone. Jon Snow caught the rail and steadied himself while Ghost trotted the deck, nostrils flaring at brine-rich wind. Even after weeks aboard ship, the salt air still tasted strange, thin compared with the crisp bite of northern snow, yet a shard of home lingered in every gust, something old, half-remembered, cold and clean. He drew it into his lungs, let it settle, and felt the roots stitched in his chest tighten as though to say, remember. Behind him sailors called to one another in half a dozen tongues, Old Valentine, coarse Northman, Stormlander drawl, the soft hisses of Nathi freedmen braiding a busy music that never quite drowned the gulls. At the pier Daenerys paced with Missandei at her shoulder, reading manifests while unsullied officers barked counts of grain, timber, and quarried stone. Dragons wheeled overhead, casting black crescents that sent lines of shadow sliding across the heaving bay. Every few heartbeats a deckmaster's whistle shrilled, and a winch clanked as cargo rose dripping from holds. "They load stone like gold," Davos grumbled, appearing at Jon's elbow. The Onion Knight squinted at the great blocks hoisted out of Windsinger. "Masons swear the South has plenty of quarry. Volcanic stone won't splinter under wildfire," Jon answered, remembering Tyrion's explanation. "Dragonstone knows how Cersei fights." Davos shrugged his good shoulder. "Aye, but stone won't fill bellies, and the bellies here rumble." He tapped the railing. "High tide within the hour. If we mean to ride, best saddle sooner than later." Jon nodded. His column, 3,000 foot, half wildlings, half stark loyal Northmen, would push west across Blackwater Rush at first light, sweeping bandits from market towns too small to interest the Lannisters yet too rich to leave to chaos. Dawn patrols had reported smoke beyond Massey's Hook, a hamlet burned, survivors strung from tree limbs to frighten travelers. Wolves, Jon thought, or worse. "See to the horses," he told Davos, then descended the gangway to the cobbled quay. Missandei greeted him with a tilt of the head as she scribbled on a wax tablet. "The last carts roll within an hour," she said, eyes flicking between lists. "Queen Daenerys asks that your foragers share whatever venison they take. City larders shrink." "They'll share," Jon said. Ghost pressed flank to his knee, crimson gaze fixed on the white-capped breakers beyond. "Tell her we'll return in 4 days." Missandei dipped her stylus in ink, paused. "The Queen also wonders if you'll dine with her before you depart." Jon felt a heat that had nothing to do with the southern sun. He remembered the edge of her smile beside the driftwood pyre, the softness of her hand closing round his. Yet there were whispers already. Tyrion's wry japes, soldiers' mutters behind palms. A dead man courting a dragon queen. What balladeers might do with that. "If time allows," he said at last. Missandei's lips curved knowingly. "Time is malleable to queens." At sunset he climbed the spine of Dragon Mount, hoof prints winding through scrub still warm from day's heat. Small fires dotted the plateau. Unsullied mess circles, black brothers swapping stew with Valentine Freeborn. Tents of Baratheon yellow pitched across the lava-slicked plain. Regal perched on a jagged tower of stone, tail flicking, while Viserion glided low over shore cliffs, scattering roosting cormorants in shrieking flurries. Above them the sky bled orange to violet. Daenerys awaited him near the broken outer parapet of the old stronghold, where a table had been set beneath fluttering banners. No courtly trappings, only a weathered plank borne by 2 trestles, upon it a loaf of sour bread, a wedge of used milk cheese, olives and brine, and a clay flagon of Dornish red. She wore riding leathers and a cloak the deep blue of summer twilight, hair caught in a single braid threaded with silver rings. Candle lamps hung from spear shafts to ward wind, their flames tossed gold across her features. For a breath Jon saw her not as queen or dragon lord, but as a woman holding hard-won hours against a storm of wars. She gestured to the bench. "I had meant for roast capon," she said, but the birds flew aside when Drogon took his exercise. The cook cursed him terribly. Jon sat. "I've eaten worse on the wall." "So they say." She poured wine into 2 chipped cups, offered one. "To walls that break and what pushes through." The toast tasted of dark cherries and smoke. For a time they ate in companionable silence, sharing torn bread and dusk. At length Daenerys spoke, voice low. "Riders from King's Landing bring rumors. Queen Cersei stockpiles wildfire beneath every district. Alchemists roam nights marking vaults with sigils. She's sowing her own fields with fire." Wind tugged a strand of hair across her cheek. She tucked it behind ear. "I swore never again to see a city burned. Yet how do we take the crown without lighting the realm?" Jon traced a grain in the crude tabletop where moisture had warped wood into wave. "A wildfire trap is only deadly if it ignites. Remove air, water douses half, so Archmaester Perez and wrote. Flood cellars, seal tunnels. But that takes time. Time buys corpses." She sipped, gazed distant. "I could fly over walls, seize the Red Keep before she knows I breathe, but Drogon still heals. And if she lights the city to spite me, what is one? Jon remembered blue corpses marching, frost blades severing screams, towers tumbling like wheat. Life lived in fear of ruin is no life, he said softly. Yet some ruins cannot be rebuilt. You carry fire, she carries fire. Difference is choice. You think I'll choose mercy? I think mercy is stronger when chosen by those who know its price. He set down cup. I've seen what ruin becomes when hope leaves. Don't let fire steal hope. She met his eyes. In hers burned a fierce sorrow, but also steel. Would you stand beside me in the city then? To remind me. Ghost whined, restless. Jon breathed. If I live past Massey's hook, yes? She smiled, something fragile yet unbowed. We shall leave some wine for that night. For days later, Jon's column rode west under a sky smeared with ragged cloud. Wildlings loped through underbrush, fletching knocked, while stark spearmen marched in double files beside supply mules. At their head, Tormund Giant's Bane sang bawdy verses about a maid of Maiden Pool who loved a giant's heart, though the rhyme made it clear other parts featured too. The song kept weary legs stepping. They skirted hamlets burnt to cinder, fields trampled to black mud where once barley waved. At the crossing of the Bronze Way, they found 3 bodies crucified upon merchant signposts. 2 men, 1 girl no older than 10, each pinned with a placard. Meat for wolves. No sigil claimed the deed. Jon ordered the bodies cut down, burned with pine needles, ashes buried beneath cairns of brick. A grizzled Karstark's veteran muttered the work wasted daylight. Jon stared him silent. Summer returns through seeds, he said. Ash feeds soil. That night they camped beside a ruined sept whose moonstone dome had collapsed, exposing cracked frescoes of the Seven. Sam tarried among them, reading faded prayers under lantern light. Ghost stayed close to Jon, hackles lifting whenever wind sighed through hollow archways. The dire wolf smelled death in the stones. Near midnight horns sounded short, frantic bursts. Jon rolled from bedroll, sword naked before his eyes fully woke. Wildling scouts rushed from darkness calling asterisk wargs. Wolves, asterisk, but their words twisted as fresh terror climbed their throats. From the tree-lean padded shapes neither holy wolf nor holy man, lank limbs, spines arched, jaws distended in permanent rictus. Their fur shone wet, matted with crimson in patterns of ritual scarring. Glacial eyes gleamed. Skin changers, Tormund spat, hefting double axe. Bad ones. Jon had heard tales. Rogue wardens called Moonclaws, exiles from green seer tribes beyond Skagos who worshipped an iceborn deity feeding on human hearts to claim memories. The Night King's passing had scattered them south like broken shards of mirror. They attacked soundless. Spears of bone flashed. A Stark pikeman fell, skull split. Wildlings loosed arrows only to watch shafts hitch in flesh without pause. Ghost leapt, jaws slamming on muscle, the creature shrieked, striking back with barbed claws. Jon charged, long claw cleaving collarbone, and felt sap wound in chest flare with heat. The Moonclaw hissed, breath stinking of rot, then lunged, teeth questing for throat. Steel met bone, Icer spattered snow. The thing crumpled only when Ghost ripped its spine from behind. Battle raged among gravestones. Sam, dagger trembling, thrust at a lunging specter's chest. Dragonglass blossomed shards of frost, and the creature held before melting to sludge. Giant's Bane laughed thunder, laying 2 with 1 axe stroke. Yet for every fallen, another step from trees. Jon retreated toward the sept's cracked altar where a half-buried 7-pointed star of marble jutted. He planted boot against it, rallied men into crescent. In his ears the heart trees pulse-thudded. He pictured rust-sap roots dripping permanence and cried out words older than Arya's lullabies, a plea to the old gods whom Southrons had never known. Wind shrieked through vaulting. Candles' gutters extinguished. In that hush, something tore, a seam in air, and green light sprouted like spring shoots around the altar. Roots, thin as reeds yet glowing, burst from earth, writhing among corpses. They coiled around Moonclaw's ankles. The creature snarled, hacking but could not sever living wood. Spears of wild pine pierced heart and lung, bodies contorted, bones cracking like saplings in gale. Within moments silence fell, broken only by Tormund's ragged laugh. Bran's voice whispered along the wind, the forest watches. Jon bowed head. Ghost whined, tail wagging once before settling. They burned a dead friend and foe and scattered ash upon holy ground. Sam found bones of children beneath fresco rubble bound by copper wire. He wept quiet until dawn. By the second week they reached the rush. Sunlight flashed across wide waters rippling between reed banks. Bandits had torched the ferry crossing months prior, only charred pilings jutted like rotten teeth. Across the river stood Maidenstream, a market town once famed for goose feather fletching. Smoke coiled there still, but potters' kilns lay cold. The smoke belonged to cooking fires of a motley host, ragged cells, words flying black flag with dog's skull. Over 300 by Tormund's count. Karen Clegane's strays, the wildling said, spitting. The pup that followed the hound's brother. Jon set gauntlet fists on hips, studying current. A stone bridge lay 5 miles upstream, reportedly collapsed. Downstream, marsh expanded, treacherous. He felt days peeling away, each wasted dawn feeding Cersei's paranoia. We must take boats. They lashed shields into rafts, lashed bark canoes scavenged from fisher huts, coaxed horses to swim. At dusk archers covered crossing with arrows tipped in pitch. The sellswords jeered, launching stones from cranked mangonels, chunks of masonry roared overhead, splashing short. Jon led the first raft, Ghost balanced at prow. Water sloshed through gaps. Halfway, blast shaft quarrels hissed. One thumped into side of his cuirass, denting plate. They landed on muddy bank amid reeds tall as men. Jon's foot slipped, cold water-soaked boot. A horn blast signaled cohorts 2 and 3. Sellswords formed shield wall across market roadway, moonlight glinting off scavenged plate. Their captain, a brute bull-necked with patchwork armor, lifted mace. Jon advanced, no speeches, only sword raised. Ghost lunged first, sowing panic. Wildlings stormed with war horns, stark men with ice-blue cloaks. Steel clattered, shields cracked, mud churned. Jon's world narrowed to rhythm, parry, riposte, sidestep, slash. Blood sprayed, hot vinegar on face. Amid fray, the captain charged, swinging mace like harvest flail. Jon ducked, felt wind above skull, drove pommel into gut. Man retched bile, staggered, then lashed chain round Jon's ankle, yanking. Jon fell, spine jarring. The captain raised mace for killing blow. But arrow sprouted through his eye. He pitched back. Jon glanced to see Sam lowering bow, eyes huge. Battle ended swift thereafter. Survivors threw weapons, begged quarter. Jon ordered them bound, questioned. They'd served Cersei for coin, but payment ceased. They preyed on villages, delivering skulls to a traveling hooded priest who claimed them for the savior of lions. The priest's camp lay 2 leagues north. At dawn, Jon led scouts through dew-wet wheat stubble. They found a circle of charred posts, each topped with child skull carved with Lannister lion. At center, a pyre of ash still warm. No tracks but bare footprints leading west toward Storm's End. Jon's jaw tightened. Ride fast, he told Tormund. Warned Daenerys, madness spreads. They left Maidenstream garrisoned and carried on, hearts heavy. Back on Dragonstone, Stannis drilled knights upon the volcanic plain, though maesters begged rest. His sling removed, arm half mended. He persisted, scarched voice flaying errors. Davos feared the king would fracture bone anew. Yet he also saw soldiers stiffen, lines straighten under Stannis' glare. Discipline forged hope. Tyrion labored nights designing sewer floodgates for King's Landing infiltration. He argued that closing off flow would backflood alchemist vaults, drowning wildfire casks. Clogged channels might breed plague, but lesser evil. He required dwarfs to crawl test tunnels. When none volunteered, he crawled himself, returning caked in filth yet grinning. If a little shit saves the realm, who am I to deny destiny? He quipped. Melisandre convened red priests nightly, chanting in tongues that made castle stones hum. Torch flames bent inward, shadows writhed. Bran stood unseen in gallery alcoves, watching patterns of light, mapping intersections of fire and weirwood within newly built mindscapes. He told Arya, in a dream of running wolves, that fire and root joined could weave shields stronger than ice, but only at a cost. Arya heard his whisper far across the narrow sea where she hunted crows in free city alleys. She fingered coin of faceless house, considered returning. The many-faced god owed a debt for winter undone, perhaps payment lay in lion's blood. By the 3rd month banners stirred across Westeros. Word of the Night King's fall spread as hedgerow tales, a dire wolf prince slaying frost demon and a silver queen melting ice dragon with sunfire. Some lords scoffed, yet green men whispered portents and small folk sang ballads. Seeds of courage spouted. Men who'd hidden from Cersei's levies now raised pitchforks. River lords long bent under Frey yoke declared for the Night's Wolf, Jon's new sobriquet vowing granaries to his cause. Grain carts rolled to Dragonstone escorted by children waving reed banners. Cersei's spies reported with alarm. Winter refugees rally under Stark Targaryen banner. Rage curled her lips. She doubled the bounty on dwarfs as petty vengeance on Tyrion, ordered archers atop every church spire, dogs in every alley. Qyburn's whisperers filled dungeons with artisans skilled in crane or trebuchet. They labored on monstrous scorpions to fell dragons from sky. Beneath Red Keep, the Gilded Company drilled Aegon's mercenaries in golden armor, yet their new prince hedged, courting Stormland's houses with promises of leniency. The realm cracked like river ice, fault lines spidering from throne to cottage. Jon's host rejoined main army at a ruined holdfast overlooking Storm's End's rain-lashed bluffs. They had driven bandits west of Tarth Strait, liberated harvest stores, rescued 40 children from a slaughterhouse cult worshipping She Who Burns, a charlatan priestess painting lions in blood. Yet losses weighed, 30 men dead, 80 wounded, 2 giants felled by poisoned harpoons. Jon felt each like stone. Daenerys rode out to greet them, rain feathering her braid. She dismounted, boots splashing, and embraced Jon before the host. No hush fell, a cheers rose instead, surprising them both. Hardened wildlings hooped, unsullied tapped spears, even Baratheon men clapped gauntlets on shield rims. Ghost barked approval. The realm, it seemed, found comfort in 2 hearts beating together after so much broke. That night where council filled Storm's End's great hall with heat and argument. Stannis presented siege timetable. Dragonstone fleet would sail north round Massey's Hook, block Mander Mouth, Star of Capital. Ground forces encircle from landward, select knights dragons strike supply barges on Blackwater. 3 months, perhaps less, until bread riots opened gates. Daenerys listened, then unfurled her own strategy, strike quick, surgical. While blockade tightens, infiltration team enters city through western catacombs rediscovered by Tyrion. Team plants weirwood root talismans Bran crafted, seeds of living with that feed on stone. Once rooted, Bran wargs through ravens, channels force of heart trees across region, dampening wildfire alchemy, cold sap smothering green fire before it blooms. Then unsullied breach mud gate, dragons overhead, queen confronts lioness before she can light final spark. Roose Bolton sneered at magic, but Davos asked simple question, if talismans fail? Tyrion answered, sewers still flood, wildfire sealed, dragons then strike Red Keep alone, sparing lower city. He acknowledged risk, always risk, but fewer than months of siege where plague might bloom and lions burn stores out of spite. Votes tallied informally. Stark men and wildlings favored speed, winter taught them swift blades cut deepest. Baratheon knights trusted siege math. Unsullied followed queen. In end, Stannis crossed arms beneath flag of fiery stag and said, if gods grant you the sorcery, I will not stand between. So long as Dragonstone men hold the ring, I march behind Dragonfire. War sealed, they feasted on razorclam stew and Dorne wine pilfered from bandit stores. Jon slipped away after midnight, climbing ramparts where rain slackened into mist. Daenerys joined, cloak billowing. They leaned on stone worn smooth by ages, watching breakers crash far below. She spoke first. Tyrion says bards already write songs of us. I dreaded songs once. They twist truth into honey, hide rot beneath rhyme. Jon sighed. Truth rusts quick, but some songs keep fire alive. She turned, candle glow from a distant window catching silver in her hair. When this war ends, what song will you sing? He hesitated. In his mind a heart tree stirred, petals of snow falling in summer meadow. One where north and south share hearth, he said. Where night guards watch western sea sunsets, not walls. Where a queen of dragons and a wolf who died learned to live. Her hand found his. Rain-dotted knuckles, warm like tears. Then let us live to reach its chorus. Ghost bait at moonless sky, a promise. 3 weeks later the fleet sailed under new moon. Cogs bore dragon sigils, Baratheon stags, direwolves. Jon boarded Honor's Gleam with 100 Stark Rangers and 30 wildling spears. Bran remained ashore in red silk tent ringed by roots transplanted from weirwood seedlings, his real bow. DY fragile, his mind already writing a murder of crows sweeping before fleet. On midnight tide the ships slipped past Maiden Stream, oars muffled. A bank of mist gathered, unnatural still, cloaking hulls. Melisandre stood at prow of flagship bright Lawler, arms raised, murmuring prayers that eddied flame along lantern wicks yet drew no glow beyond decks. Engineers called it trick of oil, sailors whispered which. As dawn grayed, Blackwater Bay opened like wolf's mouth. Far upriver spires of capital pierced haze, great September's broken dome, dragon pit's skeletal arcs, Red Keep's crown of battlements. On North Bank, plumes of black smoke climbed where refugee camps burned, Cersei's order to prevent plague, rumor said. Silence hollowed the water, even gulls avoided the cursed harbor. Siege lines formed by mid-morning. Baratheon trebuchets rolled into burned orchards, crews aligning counterweights. Unsullied phalanxes dug entrenchments, shields interlocking like iron scale. Dragons circled high beyond Scorpion range, dark moats against flat sun. Tyrion led infiltration party. Grey Worm, a dozen unsullied sappers, Jon, Davos, Sam, and Arya, arrived 2 nights prior under guise of Lyseni washerwoman, startling them all at supper. She wore traveler's garb, hair cropped, face that could have been anyone's. Ghost insisted on joining. No one dared forbid. They rowed skiff upriver beneath creaking dock pilings, slipped into drainage culvert masked by seaweed. Tide low, they waded waist-deep through filth-rich channel. Sam gagged. Arya laughed quietly. "Smells like flea bottom in high summer," she said. "Home sweet." Torchlight flickered on vaulted brick. At a junction, Tyrion halted, consulted charcoal marks he'd left years before while fleeing city. "Left to Alchemist's Guild Hall," he said. "Right to catacombs." They turned right, steps sloshing. Rats scurried along ledges, eyes reflecting red. Grey Worm signaled halt near Rustgate, bound by chains. Unsullied cutters applied acid oil, metal hissed apart. Beyond lay mausoleum corridor lined with statues of dragon lords long dead, grim stony faces streaked by mineral drip. Bran's raven perched on Dini's the Dreamer's shoulder, tilting head as if to listen to distant heartbeats. Jon and Arya advanced, each planting clay urns Bran had crafted of ironwood shavings, dragonglass dust, and seed of heart tree. They set one by each support pillar. Sam murmured verses from the Seven about light in darkness. Davos muttered curses when he stubbed toe on coffin lid. Halfway through second vault, Arya stiffened. Echoes of footfalls. She melted into shadow. Torch glow blossomed at archway. 3 gold cloaks strode, swords drawn, eyes squinting. "Thought I heard rats bigger'n goats," one grinned. He saw Jon in stark brigandine, nostrils flared. "Who?" was all he managed before Arya dropped from lintel, blade cutting throat. Grey Worm lunged, spear punching mail. Third guard bolted. Ghost pounced, ends loud. Jon wiped blood from Longclaw. "Alarms?" "None if we hurry," Arya said, eyes shining. They placed final urn at vault center beneath bedrock. Bran's raven cawed thrice, a signal. Tyrion lit slow fuse of linen rope drenched in pine tar, handed torch to Davos, and they withdrew, pace swift. In culvert they shimmied line back to skiff. Fuse hissed through tunnels as they rode into sunlight. Jon glanced over shoulder, no eruption yet. He exhaled. Then the city trembled. A low rumble coursed beneath water. Seagulls scattered. From hilltop vines of white would punch through cobbled streets, exploding up between paving stones, entwining sewer grates. Branches spread like veins across walls, drinking mortar. At Alchemist's Guild Hall, green flames flared as if to answer, but saproots coiled round furnaces, choking air, flames guttered, died. Smoke vents coughed steam, then stilled. Bells pealed confusion. Gold cloaks ran alleys, crossbows ready, but found only roots weaving through square, blossoms of red leaf unfurling, eyes carved upon trunks staring. By sundown a living maze laced western quarter, smothering wildfire with damp husks. Bran slumped in tent miles away, nose bleeding, but he smiled faintly. "The city breathes again," he whispered. Cersei watched from tower window, hands white on sill. Qyburn twittered about sorceress arborists and suggested firebombs of naphtha. She backhanded him. In throne room she summoned lords of Vale and Reach, demanded renewed loyalty oaths. Lord Tarly bowed stiffly, Baelish smiled thin but offered coin, already conspiring exits. Cersei ordered scorpions repositioned, wildfire stores relocated east of Sept ruins. She donned black armor of reinforced leather, golden lion helm crest. "Let them come," she hissed. That night Aegon Targaryen's envoy begged audience. He proposed parley with Queen of Dragons to spare small folk. Cersei laughed, handed envoy gift box containing dwarf's severed tongue, procured from poor actor, detail unspoken, and sent him back. Siege tightened. Baratheon trebuchets flung barrels of rotting fish entrails, infecting wells. Dragonstone fleet blockaded galleys. Smuggled bread prices soared to golden stag a loaf. Riots flared in Flea Bottom. Gold cloaks suppressed with crossbows. Bodies carted to Dragon Pit for pyres. On 7th dawn, Red Keep gates opened under white flag. A septon strode out bearing petitions signed by city bakers pleading surrender. Stannis' herald read, then looked to Daenerys. She nodded. Petitioners were escorted behind lines, fed, clothed. More small folk slunk out after dusk. Cersei's grip slipping. Day 9. Scorpion bolts shot Regal's wing membrane at River Bend. Dragon crashed into shallows. Jon galloped to defend, leaping from saddle onto deck of burning fisher sloop, hacking ropes that snared beast. Grey Worm's troops covered retreat. Archers on walls cheered demise until Viserion swept low, gouting flame on Scorpion, silencing cheers. Regal survived but grounded, Jon's arm scorched. Daenerys tended wound in her pavilion, salve of aloe and myrrh. She scolded him for reckless heroism. He countered scolding with reminder she'd once walked through fire for eggs. They shared tired laughter. Outside, drums of Stormlanders thudded, counting heartbeats toward final push. On the 14th night, Bran's ravens reported Scorpions repositioned along battlements near Mudgate, wildfire carts massed behind. Tyrion concluded Cersei planned to feign breakout, lure dragons, ignite Bay. They must strike first. Plans whispered by lamplight took shape. Before dawn, unsullied storm Mudgate under cover of fog conjured by Melisandre mixing salt crystals and black rose embers in braziers, steam thick as milk. Arya leads faceless infiltration into Red Keep to open postern door for Queen's Guard of Dothraki screamers newly landed from Esso's Gift of Dario. Dragons attack Scorpion nests on Maiden's Tower. Jon, Tormund, and Stark men hold Alley Labyrinth to evacuate smallfolk. Risk heavy, but dawn waited for none. Fog rolled unnatural at third watch. Unsullied advanced silent, shields brushing. Grey Worm signaled, rams crashed, doors splintered. Within gate tunnel wildfire traps sparked but sputtered, roots Bran planted had soaked pitch, dampening flame. Phalanx poured in, planting banner of silver dragon over flayed lion. On hill, Scorpion crews spun to aim at shapes swooping in gray too late. Drogon dove, jet of gold-white fire washing parapet. Bolts warped, cords snapped. Stone glowed red then crumbed. Viserion followed, strafing courtyard. Inside Red Keep, Arya navigated servant passages she'd once ghosted as a girl chasing cats. Faceless mask wore features of Queen's handmaid. No guard paused her. She unlocked postern. Dothraki streamed. Curved blades whisper death. She slipped away toward tower where bells hung. She remembered old Nan's tale. A bell rung at end may spare innocence. Perhaps. Jon led rangers through Fishmonger's Square, shouting for townsfolk to flee east over Sweetwater Bridge. Some obeyed, others cowered. A mother thrust infant into his arms, then vanished in throng. Jon could not protest, only cradle babe as though dawn itself. Ghost herded goats from lane, nipping heels. Tormund bellowed jokes, coaxing laughter even now. Then thunder cracked, wildfire vault east of Sept ruptured, plume of green fire towering. Shockwave hurled Jon against wall. Babe wailed shook. Windows blew shards. Alley filled with emerald smoke. Yet fire did not spread, roots and sap bulwarks slowed searing tide. In throne room, Cersei watched plume through stained glass shards. Lips twisted. Shedon helm hefted crossbow rumored to have slain Regal. Qyburn babbled evac routes. She shoved him aside, strode for King's Gate where last Scorpion stood. Down corridor she met her brother. Jaime's face lined with weeks of toil, gold hand dulled. Move, she hissed. He stepped aside, but caught her wrist. Enough. She snarled, aimed crossbow at his heart. Tears rimmed her eyes, yet voice iron. You always loved me. Let that love end with my throne. She fired. Bolt clanged off gold hand, grazing cheek. Jaime lunged, grappling. They tumbled through smashed window onto terrace overlooking bay. Bell tower loomed across courtyard, Arya perched inside, pulling rope. Bells began a slow mournful toll. Cersei clawed, kneed, but grief crushed strength. Jaime held her, tears mixing rain. Let it end, he pleaded. In distance troops battered gate to fortress behind them. Dragons roared. Instead of answer, she pressed mouth to his, bitter, then shoved hard. He stumbled, nearly fell. She fled along parapet toward Scorpion Nest. Below, Drogon circled. Daenerys glimpsed lone figure at nest, recognized helm crest. She angled dive. Cersei cranked lever, aiming at approaching queen. But scorpion gears jammed. Roots of weirwood sprouted through internals. Bran's final safeguard. Cersei screamed, yanking. Too late. Flame enveloped tower. Jon, watching from square, saw a silhouette of lioness vanish in furnace brighter than dawn. Bells tolled on. Fighting sputtered midday. Small folk exited by thousands under Stark banners. Unsullied quartered surrendered gold cloaks. Dothraki road streets cheering Mysa. Wildfire caches inert under root webs, threat dulled. At Red Keep courtyard, Jon climbed steps. Babe still in sling. Daenerys landed beside, Drogon's chest glowing. They regarded ruin. Spires scorched, flag of stagwolf dragon rising. Jaime knelt over soot-covered body of Cersei on broken marble where tower fell. He wept silently, blood oozing from cracked skull. He would die by dusk, but none could mend heart that chose sister even at end. Bran entered hall borne by Hodder-like freed slave, leaf upon his shoulder. He surveyed throne room where iron chair twisted jagged in rubble. Too sharp for any ruler, he murmured. With thought, roots split floor, encircled throne, crushing metal into slag, then burying beneath earth. Silence filled void. Daenerys drew breath. We will forge a new throne. One all may sit. She stepped onto dais, but did not claim. Jon joined her. Ghost padded in, babe still in sling nuzzling fur. Tyrion arrived, mud-soaked, clutching satchel of city deeds and grain chits. He looked at dais, at shattered throne, grinned. Shall I quit that chairs never last? No. He bowed. Your grace. Your grace. Bow to both. Stannis entered later, flanked by Stormlanders, face unreadable. He saw absence of throne, nodded curt. Realm chooses new seat. He unclasped sword. I will honor truce till Council of Lords decides sovereignty. Roose Bolton lingered doorway, eyeing roots. He sheathed dirk, accepted chains proffered by unsullied penance for sins north. He yielded quietly. In following weeks, grain wagons rolled into city under free cities' flags. Dornish water gardens sent oranges, arbor vineyards cast wine. Refugee camps filled with laughter, if thin. Weirwood shoots budded along lanes, white blossoms purifying gutters. Jon visited every district, listening more than speaking. He returned babe to mother found at healer tent, though the child reached for his hair, refusing release until he promised to visit. He offered bread to orphans, built pyres for unknown dead. Some called him king, he shook head. Daenerys rebuilt Dragonpit into temple of learning where maesters and red priests debated scrolls. She insisted on open courts. They tried murders of war profiteers swiftly but with mercy, sending many to rebuild burnt villages. Bran formed council of wildlings, freefolk, Summer Islander scholars, and Westerosi lords to design new wall, not of ice, but living forest barrier seated with heart trees across gift, sentinel to future dawns. One sunset on hill of Aegon's first landing, Daenerys stood with Jon. Grass quivered in sea breeze, smell of salt and summer lavender. Dragons dozed nearby like cat curled on hearth. She said, the realm must choose its voice. I will not force crown. Jon answered, nor I. He glanced toward city below where candles flickered in windows. Let them choose if they will crown two or none. She laughed softly. A chair wide enough for two wolves perhaps. He smiled. Or one seat by hearth shared. They clasped hands, fire and ice fused not by steel but hearts stubborn enough to love after darkness. Bells rang anew, this time in celebration, not surrender. And as evening star brightened, Bran's ravens sang overhead, writing circles in sky like runes promising seasons to come. Winter had broken, yet winter's lesson lingered. Hearts that beat together ward nights colder than frost, and roots grown from ashes can hold kingdoms upright where swords fail. Far north, in silent ruins of wall breach, cold hands watched aurora melt into pale dawn. He knelt, pressed palm to ice. Within crack gleamed faint ember blue. He smiled sad, whispered, not today, and rose, cloak billowing, sentinel eternal. The story of nights breaking closed not with clang of steel or roar of fire, but with murmur of leaves, a child's laugh in market square, and two hands entwined at cliff's edge as first spring blossoms opened to sea salt breeze, petals white as snow, veins red as dragaglass, turning toward a sun that, for now, shone unopposed.